My therapist once told me, "Your mind can lie to you more than any ghost ever could." That line haunted me more than her cure ever did. Because before I tell you what happened, you need to remember this. Something she said in our final session still plays in my head like a broken tape. And when you hear it at the end, you'll understand why I don't sleep anymore. My name's Kofi Adeyemi, and after everything that happened at St. Clair's, I thought I was cured, or at least contained. The pills stopped the voices for a while, and the shadows at the edge of my vision finally began to fade. I started to believe it was all behind me. But then the dreams came back. Not soft, distant, or half-forgotten. They came screaming through static like someone whispering my name from inside a radio that never turns off. Every night, the same sound, a pulse, a voice, a breath not my own. The NHS assigned me a new psychiatrist, Dr. Elaine Porter, someone who specialized in patients who see what isn't there. When I first stepped into her office, it didn't feel like a clinic, it felt like a museum of memories. The walls were lined with old clocks, each ticking out of sync as if time itself was nervous. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and something else. Something metallic. She sat across from me, her hands perfectly still, her gaze heavy like she'd been waiting for me long before I arrived. She already had my file open, but upside down. And still, without looking at a single page, she said in a calm, almost rehearsed voice, "I know exactly what's wrong with you." I remember laughing nervously, asking, "You haven't even read my file yet." But she smiled just barely and whispered, "I don't need to read it, Kofi. I was there when it started." Dr. Porter said it was important to document everything, to track the subconscious response. She handed me a small digital camera and told me to record my dreams. Every night, the same rule. Talk to the camera before bed and describe what I felt, no matter how small. I tried to laugh it off, pretending it was just therapy, just another experiment to measure my stress. The first night, I spoke awkwardly, mumbling about anxiety and lack of sleep. The second night, I barely said anything at all. I was too tired, my voice fading into the darkness. Both nights, when I watched the playback, nothing strange happened. Just me tossing and turning, whispering incoherent words into my pillow. But on the third night, the recording changed everything. I didn't remember waking up, but the camera caught me sitting upright at exactly 3:17 a.m. The clock's red digits glowed behind me like small bleeding eyes. My head turned slowly toward the lens, movements too controlled, too deliberate, not half asleep, not random. My lips were curved into a faint smile, calm and unnatural, but my eyes, they were rolled completely back, showing only the whites. For a full minute, I didn't blink. I just sat there, breathing softly through a smile that looked practiced. Then, in a low whisper, my voice but not my tone, I said, "She's watching." The words came out like a secret passed through static. I replayed it a dozen times, trying to convince myself it was sleepwalking, a trick of exhaustion. But the way my mouth moved, it was like the sentence had been rehearsed long before I ever dreamed it. When I showed the footage to Dr. Porter the next morning, she didn't react how I expected. No shock. No concern. She just leaned closer to the screen, watching my pale face frozen in that lifeless grin. Then she turned to me and smiled faintly, almost like a parent watching a child's first steps. "That's not you, Kofi," she said softly. "That's your reflection learning autonomy." The words hit like a drop of cold water down my spine. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but her eyes had drifted past me, to the one-way mirror behind my chair. For a second, I could have sworn something was moving behind the glass. My reflection's mouth was still smiling, even though mine wasn't. During our next session, I told Dr. Porter about the shadow that had started following me home. It wasn't like a hallucination or paranoia, it was real, rhythmic, and patterned. Every time I passed a mirror, I saw it just at the edge of the frame. Always half a second slower than me, like an echo of movement that didn't belong to time. I tried ignoring it, avoiding mirrors completely, even covering them with bedsheets, but its presence never faded. I could feel it behind the glass, mimicking every breath, every tilt of my head, almost curious, as if it wanted to understand how to be me. Dr. Porter listened quietly, jotting something down with her usual steady calm. Then she smiled faintly, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Do you know what happens to your consciousness when you dream, Kofi?" she asked. Her tone was calm, but her eyes didn't blink. I said no, thinking it was another psychological trick, a test of perception or lucidity. She leaned forward, her voice lowering into something that felt less like speech and more like a warning from inside a nightmare. "Sometimes," she whispered, "it forgets to come back." Her words clung to me long after I left the session. That night I couldn't sleep. The air felt heavier, like the room was underwater. I checked the time, 2:47 a.m. Then something strange happened. The ticking of the wall clock stopped. I looked at my phone, but the screen froze on the same number. Even my laptop, frozen mid-frame, music looping the same sound over and over like a dying breath of static. My apartment had fallen out of rhythm with the world. I stood there, trying to move, trying to scream, but every motion felt delayed, like my body was buffering reality. And then, in the corner of my eye, movement. The reflection in the mirror wasn't frozen. It was breathing, perfectly calm. It blinked once, slow, deliberate, while I stood paralyzed, unable to even blink back. Its smile stretched wider, almost proud, as if it had finally learned how to move without me. My heart hammered in my throat, but the reflection's chest rose slower, smoother, like it was savoring every borrowed breath. The light above the mirror flickered once, and in that flicker, our faces weren't aligned anymore. Its head tilted before mine did. It raised its hand before I even thought to move. And then I realized I wasn't watching it anymore. It was watching me. Dr. Porter said I needed a new kind of therapy, something she called cognitive alignment. Her voice was too calm when she said it, like she'd practiced that line hundreds of times. She told me it wasn't hypnosis or medication, it was cognitive alignment or medication, just a recalibration of thought patterns. I didn't understand what that meant, but the way she smiled when I hesitated made me feel like refusal wasn't an option. The room was colder that day. They strapped me into a reclined chair with thick leather belts across my wrists and chest, the kind used for patients who might harm themselves. The electrodes they attached to my temples pulsed with faint blue light, and the air smelled faintly of metal, ozone, and antiseptic, like medication and electricity and fear mixed together. A low hum filled the room as the machine powered on, followed by a voice, D-like, deep, genderless, and mechanical, speaking in slow, rhythmic commands. Breathe in, forget, breathe out, align. The lights above me started flashing in patterns, red and white, fast enough to make my vision ripple. I tried to focus, but my heartbeat synced with the rhythm, fast speaking, faster, harder, like something was pacing inside my skull. Then I started hearing something beneath the hum, faster, a faint whisper that grew clearer with every pulse. At first, it sounded like feedback, but then I recognized it. My own voice. Stop her, it said. My chest tightened. Another voice, also mine, overlap, also, overlapped, don't let her switch us again. The words looped, multiplied, and overlapped, tangled in static until it felt like 1,000 versions of me were screaming through the wires. My muscles locked, my eyes multiplied and locked, and my teeth clenched so hard I tasted blood. I tried to shout, but all that came out was a trembling gasp. The flashing lights slowed, and through the blur I saw Dr. Porter standing behind a glass partition, watching, not locked and not panicking, not surprised. Just observing, like she was timing something. My body began to numb, first my hands, then my face, until even blinking felt impossible. The last thing I saw before blacking out was her silhouette leaning close to the intercom, lips moving silently, and though I couldn't hear her, I knew she was saying, "It's taking hold." When I woke up, the room was quiet. No humming, no lights, no warmth. I was sitting in the same chair, but the restraints were gone, the machines dismantled, and the glass window behind which Dr. Porter had stood was now covered in dust, like no one had been there for years. The only sound was the faint dripping of water somewhere behind the walls. I called out. My voice echoed back, distorted, like someone repeated it half a second later in perfect mockery. I stood up, dizzy, legs trembling as if gravity had shifted. That's when I noticed the note that IT was placed neatly on the chair beside mine, written in blue ink that was still wet, smudged slightly as if the writer's hand had shaken. Just 5 words, nothing else. You're in session 2 now. At first I laughed, nervous, broken laugh that didn't sound like me at all. But then the realization hit like ice water. I didn't remember session 1 ending. I didn't remember how I got here. I turned to the mirror on the wall, the same one that had been blank when I arrived. This time, my reflection wasn't sitting still. It was still strapped in the chair, eyes wide open, staring back at me in horror. Its lips moved, but the sound came from behind me. You shouldn't have let her switch us again. The next morning, I found an old VHS tape in my mailbox. No return address, no envelope, just my name carved into the black plastic like someone had used a blade. The edges were rough and splintered, as if the name had been scratched in desperation. My first thought was that it was some prank, but something about the weight of the tape. It felt warm, like it had been held too long by human hands. I looked around the empty hallway, all the doors shut, the lights buzzing overhead with that sickly yellow hue that makes shadows look alive. My apartment felt smaller when I went back inside, as though the air had thickened with anticipation. I didn't own a VHS player, so I borrowed one from my neighbor, an old woman who stared at me for a moment before handing it over. She said quietly, "Don't watch it after dark." Her words followed me down the hall like an echo I couldn't shake. I placed the tape into the player, the mechanical click sounding too loud in the silence. The screen hissed alive with static, white noise filling the room like breathing. Then an image flickered through. A chair. A figure. The room was familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. The same peeling wallpaper, the same humming light above the frame. It was my therapy session. But it wasn't me on the screen. The man looked like me, every scar, every twitch, every flick of the eyes identical. He was sobbing, trembling, and begging for something I couldn't hear. The audio was warped, voices overlapping like multiple recordings of the same plea, slightly out of sync. I leaned closer. The timestamp in the corner read March 14, 2019. My mind went blank. That wasn't possible. I was still in the US then. I didn't even know Dr. Porter. I hadn't moved to the UK until 4 years later. But there he was, my face, my voice, crying on a tape from before I'd ever arrived. Then from the corner of the screen, a shadow leaned in. Dr. Porter. She wasn't speaking to him directly, she was speaking to the camera. Her voice was soft, almost comforting. "You've already told me this story once before." The tape started to rewind on its own, screeching backward until the sound warped into a low metallic moan. I hit eject, but the machine didn't respond. The image kept playing. The version of me on screen suddenly stopped crying and looked straight at me through the static. His eyes were red, his mouth trembling, and he whispered something under the distortion that felt like it was happening inside my skull. "You shouldn't have left the session." Then everything went dark. The TV turned off. The room went silent except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Except the clock had stopped at 3:17 a.m., the same time I'd been sitting up on camera days ago. I looked down. The VHS tape was gone. Not in the player. Not on the table. Just gone. In its place was a folded scrap of paper, damp as if pulled from water. One sentence. Memory alignment successful. Subject relocated. For the first time, I realized something I hadn't before. There were faint fingerprints on my television screen. Not mine. Larger. And they were on the inside of the glass. I went back to her office the next morning, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep the steering wheel straight. The GPS still listed the clinic's address, but when I turned the corner, my heart dropped. The building was dead. The once white walls were gray with grime, and the glass windows were shattered and patched with boards, like someone had tried to bury the past under layers of dust. The sign that had read, "NHS Cognitive Therapy Unit," was half torn, hanging by one rusted screw. I parked and walked closer, every step crunching over broken glass and damp leaves. The air smelled faintly of rot and sterilizer, an impossible combination, like time itself had decayed here. The front door wouldn't budge, so I circled to the side alley where a smaller door hung loose on its hinges. It creaked open into darkness. The inside was nothing like I remembered, no white floors, no buzzing machines. Just silence and shadows. Dust blanketed the hallways like snow, muffling every step, but in the center of the main room something caught my eye. One chair, my chair, stood perfectly upright, its leather straps unbuckled but still coiled as if they'd just been undone. I touched it. It was still warm. My breath caught in my throat. On the table beside it sat a camera. My camera. The one Dr. Porter had used during our sessions. The small red light blinked. A live recording. I moved closer, heart pounding, and saw the timestamp on the screen. Live. Session 3. For a moment, everything inside me went cold. I hadn't scheduled another session. I hadn't even made an appointment. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the old machine, but slowly, almost tenderly, a voice broke through the static. Dr. Porter's voice. "Don't panic, Kofi," she whispered from somewhere behind me. "The treatment only hurts if you remember which one you are." I spun around, but the room was empty. Only my breathing filled the air, sharp, uneven, animal. I backed toward the door, desperate to get out, but something felt wrong. The exit didn't look the same. The wood shimmered faintly, reflecting the faint light from the blinking camera. I reached for the handle and my hand hit something cold and smooth, not metal. Blast. The door wasn't a door anymore. It was a mirror. And inside it, my reflection wasn't mirroring me. It stood perfectly still while I shook in terror. Then, slowly, deliberately, it smiled, the kind of smile that didn't belong to me. Its right hand lifted into view, holding something metallic, glinting under the low light. A scalpel. My chest tightened as the reflection leaned closer to the glass, blade trembling with excitement. For a moment, I thought I saw someone standing behind him, behind my reflection. Dr. Porter's pale face, eyes hollow, whispering something I couldn't hear. And then the reflection raised the scalpel higher, pressing it against the inside of the glass like it was testing how thin the barrier was. The red recording light blinked faster. My own heartbeat matched its rhythm. And before I could even move, the reflection mouthed my name, Kofi. The sound of glass cracking echoed through the room. I woke up in my apartment, or at least it looked like my apartment. The lights were all on, but something about the brightness felt wrong, like every bulb was 1 second away from burning out. My pulse was pounding so loud I could hear it echo through my ears. My shirt was damp with sweat, my breath heavy, and my mouth dry as dust. The last thing I remembered was the mirror, the scalpel, the sound of glass cracking. But now, everything was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that presses against your chest like a weight. My phone buzzed suddenly, the vibration slicing through the stillness. One new voicemail. No number. Just the words, unknown caller. My hand trembled as I pressed play. Congratulations, Kofi. It was Dr. Porter's voice, calm, warm, and clinical. The tone she used right before she said something terrible. You made it to the end of your treatment, she continued. I froze, staring at the reflection in my TV screen, barely recognizing my own pale, flickering face. Her voice smiled through the speaker. Now, close your eyes. I'll handle the rest. A sharp chill crept up the back of my neck. The air felt heavier, charged, as if someone had exhaled right beside me. I didn't move. Couldn't. The sound of slow, wet breathing filled the space behind me. One inhale. One exhale. Measured. Human. Close. Too close. I turned, slowly, painfully, every muscle in my body shaking like it wanted to run but couldn't remember how. And then I saw him. Standing at the end of the hallway, half in shadow, half in light. Same face. Same clothes. But his eyes were bottomless, black, liquid, like ink spreading across glass. His smile was wider than mine, strained and trembling, the kind that looks carved into flesh rather than worn. My stomach dropped as I realized he wasn't just watching me, he was breathing with me. Every rise of his chest matched mine perfectly, every blink was half a second late. He tilted his head, studying me like a stranger seeing himself for the first time. My phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor, still playing the message. Don't fight it, Kofi, Dr. Porter's voice whispered through the static. You're just aligning. The reflection has always been more stable. He started walking toward me. Each step was deliberate, heavy, and slow, like someone savoring every second before a reunion. The air around him rippled faintly, and I could swear I saw faint red wires trailing behind his shadow, stretching into the walls like veins. The closer he got, the more my head began to pound, flashes of rooms, hospital lights, and hundreds of versions of me whispering in sync. Stop her. Don't let her switch us again. But now I didn't know which one I was. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. For a split second, I saw him standing right in front of me, his face inches from mine. He smiled, slow, confident, and final, and placed a cold hand on my shoulder. Then everything went quiet. I woke up again. Same room. Same lights. Same air. My phone is on the table, still recording. I can hear my voice whispering softly into the mic, saying words I don't remember speaking. She's watching. She's always watching. I don't know if I'm awake anymore or if I ever was. And now, I can't remember if I'm the one telling this story or the one listening. And if you ever wake up to your therapist's voice whispering in your head, don't open your eyes. She might still be finishing your session. Subscribe before she schedules yours.